This video is going to teach us how to solve quadratic equations. Before we start, let us review one-step equations. So we are going to review how to do one-step equations. The first equation is x minus 3 equal to 0. The second equation is x minus 7 equal to 0. The equal to 0 is what makes it an equation as opposed to an expression. To solve this, we would add 3 to both sides, and the answer we will get is that x is equal to 3. To solve the number 2, we would add 7 to both sides, and we will get that x is equal to 7, and that will be our solution. Let us now review how to solve two-step equations. So if we have x is equal to 2x minus 5 equal to 0 and 3x minus 2 equal to 0. Let us see how we would solve that. Let us review. So the first thing we will do is we will add 5 to both sides. So we will get that 2x is equal to 5. And we would add 2 to both sides, and we will get that 3x is equal to 2. Now they both have become one-step equations. So we divide this by 2, and we'll get that x is equal to 2.5. Divide both sides by 3, and we'll get that x is equal to 2/3. Before you can solve quadratic equations, you must be able to solve one-step and two-step equations. Let us now look at solving a quadratic equation. Equation means that it is equal to something. To solve a quadratic equation, it must be equal to 0. If the quadratic is not equal to 0, then we must make it equal to 0 before we attempt to solve it. This is a quadratic that is already in the factorized form. So if it is in the factorized form, this is how we solve the quadratic. We know that if two things are being multiplied, so one thing is being multiplied by a second thing, and the answer is 0, then one of those two things must then be equal to 0. So for this quadratic to be equal to 0, either this bracket is equal to 0 or this bracket is equal to 0. So it is exactly like that we will state our answer. We would say either x minus 3 equals 0 or x minus 7 equals 0, putting each bracket equal to 0. So now we see we have two one-step equations. So I will add 3 to both sides, and I will get that x is equal to 3. And in this one, I would add 7 to both sides, and I will get that x is equal to 7. So for this quadratic equation to be true, it means that if I put x as 3, then this bracket becomes 0, and I get 0 by the second bracket, and I will see that that answer will be 0. And if I put x as 7, then this bracket will become 0, and anything I multiply by 0 will give me 0. So either of these two answers would be correct, and therefore I need to state both. And this is exactly how I would lay it out when I'm asked such a question. This is another quadratic that has also already been put in the factorized form. So it is already factorized. So we want to solve the quadratic equation. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that the equation is equal to 0. To solve a quadratic equation, the equation must be equal to 0. So when we look now, we have one thing multiplying by a second thing. So our answer will be that either x equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. X equals 0 is already a solution, so we don't have to do anything with that. This one, we add 3 to both sides, and we'll get that x is equal to 3. So either x equals 0 will make this equation true, or x equals 3. So if I make x equal to 3, this bracket will become 0, and the equation would also be true. And this is exactly how we would lay out our answer if we are asked a question like this. Here is yet another quadratic equation, another equation where the equation is equal to 0. So we see it is equal to 0 because to solve a quadratic, the equation must be equal to 0. It is already in the factorized form. So because it is in the factorized form, we know that either this bracket equals 0 or this bracket equals 0. So we will get that either 2x minus 5 equals 0 or x minus 1 equals 0. And this is exactly the statement you would write and how you would write it. You would then solve each of these equations. So I would add 5 to both sides. So I will get that 2x is equal to 5. And then I would divide both sides by 2. And I will get that x is equal to 2.5. This is why we had to review one-step and two-step equations before we did solving a quadratic equation. I add 1 to this side, which means I also add 1 to this side, and I will get that x is equal to 1. So this quadratic equation would be true if x was equal to 2.5 or if x was equal to 1.